and I shall miss the the Maine far woods, far north. It's been beautiful, but fall is almost spent. I think it gets. I got to go to Virginia to get a second fall. Good to have you with me this week. It's going to be an important 30 days. 30 days to the election. 30 days to the election. That's it. 30 days to the election. Have you gotten your vote yet? If so, return it immediately. Have you voted early yet? You can. If you haven't, go out and do so. The earlier you vote, the better, and vote for every Republican in every race. This is Joe Biden's inflation. This is Joe Biden's stagflation. This is Joe Biden's recession. This is Joe Biden's weakness. He's supported by a Democratic Congress, Senate and House, and they both have to flip. The House and the Senate have to flip, and especially stick around, vote for state legislators, vote for governors, and in school board races, which are typically nonpartisan. Vote for anyone who's not an incumbent, and only those incumbents with whom you've personally spoken and about whom you are 100% confident that they stood up against the closures, they stood up against the teachers union, they realized that public education has to change dramatically and follow the Arizona model so that dollars follow the student. We can't keep imprisoning students in failed schools. Over the weekend and this morning, the number one story. First, on Vladimir Putin's birthday, his most beautiful thing that he did, his biggest project, the equivalent of the wall for him, is the bridge that he built from Russia to Crimea, and it got blown up. Truck bomb is suspected by many. Nobody's quite sure. The Ukrainians are believed to have been behind it. Nobody's quite sure. But Putin is aghast because he opened that very long bridge by driving a truck across it 3 years ago, I think, on his birthday, and now it's in tatters. It's blown up. And the Russian soldiers in Crimea are in a world of hurt as they are across the entire area of invasion as Ukrainians continue their counteroffensive. Vladimir Putin stuck back overnight, launching 75 missiles on Kyiv and 4 other cities. They're called revenge attacks everywhere in the New York Times, in the Telegraph, in the Times of Israel. Kyiv hit by blasts as Russia strikes cities across Ukraine, multiple dead and injured. That's because the Crimean bridge explosion leaves Russian supply lines exposed, according to the Financial Times. His bridge of dreams, it's called in the Washington Post, explodes in flames. It really was quite dramatic. It's got a railroad line on it, and that's the only way they can really get adequate supplies to Crimea because the roads and railroad lines running through the occupied territory by Russia are primitive, in danger. Many of them have been overrun by Ukrainians already in the counteroffensive. This mirthless attack, as it's been called in the Telegraph this morning, is simply Putin's reaction to once again being embarrassed. Meanwhile, there are allegations that arrests are underway in Moscow. Certainly the military blogosphere in Moscow has called for, and they have successfully seen promoted a butcher. They want to use tactical nuclear weapons. They're losing. They're losing face. They're losing stability. Putin has built himself a Stalin-like security apparatus around him, so no one's going to bump him off like they took Khrushchev off one day. But you have to wonder how long this can go on. With 200,000 Russian men fleeing, they're going to send conscripts directly to the front line. They're going to get butchered by Ukrainian disciplined, large, and increasingly well-armed military. All this could have been avoided, by the way, if Joe Biden had previously armed Ukraine, but he didn't keep up what President Trump had begun. Held back on the HIMARS, held back on the artillery. You never hold back on the artillery. Meanwhile, the toll in Florida continues to mount. It's now 94 dead in Florida, but the recovery effort goes well, despite a few efforts to say something other than this. Ron DeSantis doing a magnificent job of recovery in Florida. Look, the feds are doing their part, too. It's a pretty bad situation in Fort Myers and other places, and everyone is pulling together. But the left is so urgently trying to make this a Katrina for Ron DeSantis that it's not working. DeSantis got a pontoon bridge, opened up to Pine Island in 3 days in a Pete Wilson-like exercise of gubernatorial authority. There's an explainer in the Reuters this morning. Marijuana pardons in U.S. help thousands leave others in prison. U.S. President Joe Biden's pardon for thousands of Americans convicted of simple marijuana possession under federal law has profound impact. Now, I got to ask you, do you remember when Donald Trump wanted to do prison reform? So they began No One Left Behind Act. And it took months, indeed years, to get it passed. Among others, Tom Cotton was opposed. I was opposed for a long time. Finally, Jared Kushner called me up and said, "What's getting your goat about this bill?" And I said, "Well, you're treating fentanyl people like they're dealing drugs. And like, that's not the same thing. They're mass murderers." And he thought about it and agreed, and they changed the law. And I dropped my opposition. I'm still, the jury's out. But tens of thousands of people have left prison because of First Step that's supposed to release nonviolent offenders. Why in the world does a specific process get overlaid with a blanket pardon? Everyone has pointed out what Joe Biden doesn't seem to know. People in jail for possession of marijuana, with very rare exceptions, are there because they pled, and they pled down from a more serious offense, some sort of drug dealing. So when he's letting out thousands and thousands of people, as many as 30,000 in federal prison, who are there because of marijuana offenses, you don't know who he's letting out. You'll find out after the election. He's just trying to buy votes. He's desperate. He's desperate because, my gosh, this is going bad against the Democrats. You can hardly bear it for him. Really, seriously, it's that bad. So bad that the New York Times actually ran a story over the weekend of California's bullet train. There is no bullet train in California. There's a Stonehenge in the Central Valley that costs $1.5 million a day to pretend is going to turn into something, and it never will. That's a government program that exemplifies what the Democrats have done with the infrastructure money. Billions and billions and billions have been poured into the sands of the Central Valley. The high-speed rail that was never made a good sense there is just going to be a disaster. Gavin Newsom tries to shut it down, but it lives on. It can't be killed. It's like The Thing in the old Stephen McQueen film, if you haven't watched it. Out there in the Central Valley, every single day, they continue to pour $1.5 million into the ground after billions have gone into the ground. Usually, and all they have to show for it, no train, nothing's working, just giant pillars of cement, where somebody's idea of the Mickey Mouse train of the Central Valley was going to go up. We also had another amazing story come out over the weekend, how social media censorship became a front line in the culture war. Now, it's not actually a front line in the culture war because everybody, left, right, and center, hates big media, just like everybody, left, right, and center, hates big tech. And so it's not a front line. It's everybody's line. Everybody wants Meta under control. They want Twitter to be sold to Elon Musk. I mean, the employees at Twitter don't want Elon Musk, but the shareholders sure do. People like me who believe in robust free speech situations want it redone. There's also a story as the blue bubble media attempts to preserve affirmative action, because it's part of the gospel of the left. Affirmative action must be used. The University of North Carolina once barred black students. Now it's fighting for affirmative action. It has not barred black students for at least 60 years. And in any event, it's unconstitutional to use race in any way in admissions. And that's going to be a 6-3 vote, maybe a 7-2 vote. It's going to be done by the end of this year. And you know who's going to be upset by this? The diversity offices at the major universities and the admission offices, where they're going to have to start going back to merit metrics. And I think actually everyone in America should be just demanding merit metrics. I'll explain more after the break what that is. 2 Iranian security forces were killed last night as U.S. and Israel are watching Iran fire missile after missile at the Kurds in Kurdistan with impunity because they're trying to divert attention from the fact that 19 children and 185 people have been killed by the security forces since demonstrations began in Iran. Joe Biden remains silent, just like Obama did during the Green Revolution. He's standing by. Elon Musk is going to get Twitter. China's chip industry is set for deep pain because U.S. export controls kick in. And BlackRock walks a political tightrope on climate issues and investment in China. I mean, this is not news. The biggest news is Democrats everywhere are running for their lives because the red wave is large and growing larger. Because if you bought gasoline over this weekend, you know why. Don't go anywhere. I'm Hugh Hewitt from Studio North, joined by my friend, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is announcing today a brand new book by Mike Pompeo is out. Never Give an Inch. Actually, it's not out. It is announced. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. How the heck are you?
I am great. I fancy myself a pretty good giver of titles. I helped Sarah Huckabee Sanders come up with Speaking My Mind. I don't think I could have come up with a better title for a book than Never Give an Inch for Mike Pompeo.
Well, thanks. Look, it tells some stories about the work that we did that, frankly, just no one wants to tell, and so it was important to recount that history. I think there's a little bit of humor because I was a CI director. There's some pretty exciting, good stuff in there too, and I hope everybody will go take a look at it and enjoy reading. I think it's a lot of fun to read through and tells the story of how we put the American people first.
Now, I want to go through how Never Give an Inch philosophy will apply to Putin, Xi, and to Iran. But first, I've just got to ask you about what Nikki Haley said to me on Thursday, which made a little bit of news in my head because I thought it was wrong. She was talking about moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And of course, I'm glad Donald Trump did that. And I recalled you were a supporter of that and said, oh, no, Mike didn't support that. And you can ask Mike. So I'm asking you, Mr. Secretary, I thought you supported that.
Of course I did.
Well, of course I did.
I was a CI director at the time. No, it was a complicated problem set. I had real responsibilities as a CI director to make sure that we did everything right in the run up to that, so that we could be in place to support the decision the president intended to make. But of course, made perfect sense to me, and you can see the work I did more publicly as a Secretary of State to know that there's no greater supporter of the Jewish homeland and the Israeli people's right to live in Judea, Samaria, and all of Israel, and that their capital ought to be in Jerusalem.
Well, I thought that was maybe the first elbow thrown by the former UN ambassador in what might be the 2024 debates, but we will return to that. Now, let me take Never Give an Inch and ask, how does that fit with Pipe Hitter, which is the cavpack.com link? I love your language. Who comes up with the title Never Give an Inch, by the way? Who gets the credit for
that? Sadly, that's all me, Hugh. And my son has heard that so many times. You know, Hugh, it's not about the fact that there aren't places where one can find accommodation, place to compromise, but on the things that matter, on the central idea of we win, they lose, as Reagan used to put it, on the central idea of you have to deter the bad guys with the enormous might of the American nation, not just our military might, but our economic power, our diplomatic tools. On those things that really matter, you have to be very clear. And once you start to give, Hugh, you know the story. The bad guys will drive a truck through weakness.
Never Give an Inch, coming out in January. We will talk about it in detail when it does. Now, let me turn to the headlines. Vladimir Putin is warning this morning that he will continue his retaliatory missile strikes on Ukraine. And he's killed hundreds of people in strikes on apartment buildings. They're war crimes in retaliation for the destruction of the bridge that, really hit him in his ego because he put a lot into building that bridge from Russia to Crimea. What does Never Give an Inch theory mean right now vis-a-vis Putin? What do you want to hear the president say?
Well, first thing I wanted to do is stop going to fundraisers and talking about Armageddon. Imagine John Kennedy going to a Democrat fundraiser saying, "Hey, Khrushchev's moving some missiles into Cuba. Can you send me a check?" It's just reckless and dangerous. Putin hears that too. Never giving an inch there means continuing to support the Ukrainian people with all the tools they need. Not half measures, not slow, not delivering 4 HIMARS when you can put 20 in place, all of the things that will bring this to a closure. And closure looks like Vladimir Putin making the decision in his own mind that the risk, the cost is too great. He has to perceive that risk. This is the traditional notion of peace through strength that Ronald Reagan executed for 4 years, prevented Putin from doing exactly what he did a couple of months after I left office. This is exactly the model that delivers for America and the American people, and we ought to get back at it without risk. The Biden administration always just talks about we risk antagonizing him as provoking him. I think he's been provoked, you, and what they need is leadership that demonstrates real resolve. And if you give an inch, Putin will launch more rockets, kill more Ukrainians, and frankly disrupt Europe through a winter that's going to be an incredibly difficult one.
Now, Mr. Secretary, I noted, I was talking with General Kellogg in the Fox screen room 2 weeks ago, and General Kellogg, big fan of yours, obviously, was telling me the one thing you never do is ration artillery. You push the artillery into the first phase of the battle, and we have been dribbling out artillery, especially the HIMARS. Would you recommend we just open the floodgates at this point, because there's no point in supporting Zelensky at 30%?
This has been my core critique. So I applaud the Biden administration for keeping Europe together as long as they have and urging the Europeans to do more. But we have been just slow and late and short, right? To your point, that's what I talked about HIMARS before. We should be delivering them all of the equipment that they're asking for. They haven't asked for our kits. They haven't asked for our soldiers, our Marines. They've simply asked us to provide them the tools they need, and they'll do the fighting. And when they do, when Putin can see that they're going to have the resources they need quickly and powerfully, this is much more likely to bring this fighting to a close than what Biden has done to date.
I couldn't agree more, and I hope somebody is listening from Team Biden. Let me turn to Taiwan. I asked Ambassador Haley if she's been. She has not, and I think it's sort of incumbent on people who want to lead the Republican Party to visit Taiwan. I know you've been there. What did you find when you went there?
So, Hugh, I've now been there twice since leaving office. I found that people that are prepared to protect their freedom, their sovereignty, they love the fact that they get a chance to make decisions for themselves. They are demonstrably showing that democracy can work in a culture like theirs. This is what she's story is. No, the only way for our culture to survive is authoritarian Marxism, and Taiwan stands as a beacon that refutes that. Their economy is strong. Their people are strong. What they need is an America that is prepared not only to provide them the tools that they're asking for, which the administration has again refused to do at this moment, the most important moment, and we also need to continue to round up the allies, the friends, the South Koreans, the Australians, the Japanese, and make sure that they understand the risk that extends not just to Taiwan, but to them as well. And when we do, we'll prevail.
There's another bipartisan CODEL landing in Taiwan during this congressional recess, and I'm very glad that it's going. But I do want everyone who would be president now or in the future to visit Taiwan. And I just think you can't understand the defense of an island until you see it. Am I right about that, Mr. Secretary?
You're right about that, Hugh. And on my last trip, I guess 3 weeks ago now, I got out of Taipei. I met with the government officials, but I got out of Taipei to meet with ordinary Taiwanese citizens and the business community, including those folks that are involved in the manufacture of semiconductors, wafers for semiconductors, something that matters an awful lot to every American all across our country. And this is another place, right? The subtitle of the book, Never Give an Inch, is Fighting for an America I Love. If you are prepared to fight for the America you love, you have to make sure that the resources we need are available to drive our cars, to use our phones, to live our lives in freedom. And supporting Taiwan is deeply connected to American security and American prosperity. And I hope that every American leader who wants to understand the Pacific threat, the threat from the Chinese Communist Party, will go to Taiwan and meet the Taiwanese leadership and its people.
To the great shame of America, Joe Biden has said nothing himself about yet another massacre of Iranians by the mullahs. President Obama, of course, shamefully silent during the Green Revolution. It's happening again. 185 at least Iranians have been murdered in the last 2 weeks, 19 of them children. What should the United States be saying and doing right now about Iran, Mike Pompeo?
Well, go look at what I did and what President Trump did for 4 years. When the Iranians people were rising up, we supported them with every tool we had available. Most importantly, our voices, our willingness to demonstrate that we were with the Iranian people and throwing off the regime that terrorizes not only them, but Israel, our allies in the Middle East, and our own nation. You can see they're trying to kill senior leaders here in the United States. This is serious business, and the Biden administration's silence, and worse yet, sitting at the table offering them $7 billion worth of instantaneous economic relief is deeply dangerous, and to me, Hugh, absolutely incomprehensible in the face of the Iranian people who just want the chance to have a government that reflects their understanding of the world.
I'm so glad you said that because we always say markets are forward-looking. So are dictators. And when dictators know $7 billion's coming their way, or whatever trillion, whatever the number is, they act accordingly. And now they're raining down missiles on Kurdistan. Let me close. We got a minute, Mr. Secretary. Never give an inch. That means you've been out there fighting for every inch on the Republican map. How do you feel about the red wave, which I think is forming?
I think it's great. It's not even just red. People from Democrats, independents, they can all see that their lives are worse off today as a result of Joe Biden. My book talks about that, too. You can go to MikePompeo.com and pre-order the book. It talks about how the weakness abroad impacts us here at home, whether that's higher gas prices because the world decided that Green New Deal was more important than actually taking care of people. We can do it. We can get this right. I'm very confident we will, and November will be a big success for the country.
MikePompeo.com. Go pre-order Never Give an Inch. Also stop by CavPack.com help him close the final segment for Republicans across the United States. Never give an inch at MikePompeo.com. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll be right back, America. Good Monday morning, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. The person who has been in my ear the most the last year, other than the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, is my next guest. Father Michael Schmitz, who I've never met, lives in Duluth, Minnesota, where I have an affiliate, one of the 470 affiliates. But Father Michael Schmitz started something for me this year, the Bible in a Year podcast, which I don't think actually began this year, but I began it on January 1, as did the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. And here it is, about 280 days later, and I'm only 2 days behind. Father Michael Schmitz, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. You're quite the remarkable story of 2022.
Well, thank you. I am about 2 weeks behind, so you being 2 days behind is way better than me.
I need people to understand the revolution that you have brought about. Now, the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is a Presbyterian. I'm a Roman Catholic. And we both enjoy your podcast every single day, and we only are ever about a day or two behind. Would you tell people where this began, how it began, and how big it is now? Because the Bible in a Year, available at Apple, at Spotify, from Ascension Press. They use the Great Discovery Bible from Ascension Press because I can say that because I've heard it for 280 days in a row from Father Mike. Tell people how this got started because it's really a phenomenon.
Yeah, no, it was great. Back in 2020, I don't know, some things happened around the world. And I remember I was caught up. Actually, I was in Israel. I landed in the Holy Land on a Sunday morning with a bunch of students. I work at the University of Minnesota Duluth. And that morning we landed. And that afternoon, the Prime Minister of Israel said, we're closing travel, everything, everyone's got to leave, So we scrambled. We got out of there in 2.5 days. It was a crazy, chaotic kind of travel. Getting back to the States then, it was one of those situations where I was just thinking, okay, what's going on in the news? And I found myself so constantly distracted by so many different voices and so many different people with opinions. And of course, everyone's kind of losing their minds about very, very strongly and passionately held opinions, but haven't really thought too deeply on things. I found myself getting distracted. And I thought, you know what I need to do? I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to go back to some timeless truth here. And at one point, I was reading the book of Judges in the Old Testament, and that was a chaotic time. I mean, you went through it. You know the story where one of the refrains of that book of Judges is, in those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Just to summarize the chaos that was happening. I remember thinking, oh, this is nothing new. What we're going through right now is nothing new. And I thought, I need to go back to that. And I think I wonder if other people need to go back to that. And so I contacted Ascension Press and said, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. What do you think about going through the entire Bible in a year, making a podcast? And they said, that's a great idea. Let's get started. And so we did. And that was 2021. And this is now year 2 in 2022.
And I want to explain to everyone, it's between 20 and 30 minutes long. It's Old Testament and New Testament. Father Mike and Jeff Cavins have designed a reading program. You will actually hear every word in the Bible, including those books that the Protestants don't care for. Martin Luther cut out 6 or 7 books. That's all explained along the way. And it's fabulous. First of all, don't go into the radio business. I do not want to compete with you, Father Mike.
That is really kind of you, especially coming from a pro. So Jeff Cavins, as you mentioned, years ago he know about all the people who have tried to read through the Bible. And you start with Genesis and you're like, oh, this is great. And you go to Exodus, well, that's great too. And then you hit Leviticus and it's like, wait, what happened? And because Genesis and Exodus are stories, right? You just can follow the journey of these people. Then you hit this book Leviticus and it's a bunch of rules. And since even though it's important, people who are reading, they lose the story. And so Jeff said, okay, he came down and he figured out this. If I follow these 16 books, these 16 narrative books of the Bible, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, you'll get the story. You'll never leave the story, never lose the story. And so what some folks did is they said, okay, these 16 books of narrative books, where do the other books fit in, kind of in tandem with them? And so, we created this way that you can go through the entire Bible from, January 1st to the end of the year without ever losing the story. And so even those kind of, I don't want to say random, but those non-narrative books, you still get the chance to hear them, to still get the chance to go through them without ever being like, wait, I'm lost. Who who is Isaiah talking to? Who's Jeremiah talking to? It's, I get it. This is in the context of all the chaos that was happening with the Babylonians and the Assyrians. And by this point, Hugh, I imagine you know those stories pretty well.
Well, I'm a product of Catholic education, Father. So K through 12, I had a religion class every day. I still don't know where anything is in the Bible until I'm done with you. And so I didn't know that Jeremiah was the weeping prophet. I never knew about the Mordecai story in Esther. I'm just talking about the recent things. If anyone has ever read Proverbs through in straight, their mind is clogged with pithy sayings that they don't put together. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt the same way. So she's, cradle Presbyterian and knows scripture, but not like, Catholics just hear it all, but they don't know where it goes. How many people are listening to a Bible in a Year podcast?
Well, yeah. So we recently, I think we hit over 350 million all-time downloads, and I don't know how many people that is. I think every I don't know if that is 350 million. I think maybe it's over 400 million all-time downloads, closing in on that. So
that's astonishing.
Yeah,
do you have any idea how many have subscribed to it?
They don't tell me those things. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, every day you ask for subscribers, and it is easier to subscribe. And you don't read the comments on the reviews, never do that. But did you expect this? I mean, when the New York Times profiled you on August 29th, and I've been listening to you every day as my wife had been listening to you every day, and we often talk about what you talk about, I found it very amusing that the contentious woman proverb obliged you to say the obvious, which is contentious husbands are just as bad. But tell me, did you expect anything like this?
No, it was really fascinating because I did not. I thought, sometimes you do something because you're like, I need this. You're thinking, okay, this will be good for me, and I think this will be good for the people around me. I did not realize when January, it must have been January 3rd or 4th hit, and some folks contacted me and said, "Do you know that the podcast is number one?" I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." Like, no, number one in the world, or number one on all of Apple's podcast. And I thought, well, that's neat, but I had no idea because it's just, I think the simplicity of, I think there's so many people who want to read the Bible. They have this sense in them that just like, I wonder what's in that book. I just want to know. And yet there's two things that happen. One is it gets tough in the sense of you just have to crack open the Bible. For myself, I don't know about you, but if I sit down and start reading, sometimes like 50% chance I'll be falling asleep pretty soon. So, but being able to press play and just listen is different. And that's one piece. So it makes it easy. The second part is it's so easy to get lost. And so I think having some kind of guide is really helpful. So at the end of every episode, we read that passage or whatever the collection of chapters we have for the day, and then try to go back and it makes sense of it. Try to go back and say, okay, this is what you just heard. Here's what that means. Here's how you can apply it to your life. And I think that's been helpful for people.
Well, also, encouragement is helpful, knowing where you're going. I never downloaded the plan, all right? I don't have the pages. I'm not marking them off. I just figure you'll tell me. But I have kept up within 2 days. I don't do it on the weekends. I catch up on Monday with a long trundle. And so I'll do 3 programs today. But Father Mike, you've got a magnificent voice. And I think what is charming, and don't let this go to your head, but golly, gosh, neat. The Minnesota nice stuff disarms people who come to the table prepared to argue with you. I mean, they can't ever argue with you. You're just so Minnesotan.
But I never thought of that. I never realized that I said these things until I saw someone who made a T-shirt that said something like "Man, oh man,
man, oh man."
I was like, I said, I say that? They're like, you say that all of the time.
Oh, gosh, golly, Father Mike, exactly. Oh, my gosh. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm getting off the track here. Let me go. I'm going to work on my Father Mike imitation because it's absolutely winsome.
So
let me ask you, though. My wife is a Protestant's Protestant, all right? And I'm a Catholic's Catholic, and I usually go to Mass on Saturday and attend Presbyterian Church with her on Sunday when we're in our hometown of Virginia. How many are Catholics and how many are not Catholics who have downloaded those 450 million downloads?
That's a great question because it is across the board. Like there, not only are there Catholics and non-Catholic Christians, but there's also, I've had numerous atheists who have written to me and reached out and said, I started this because, I probably should know the Bible. In fact, I got a letter from a man. This must have been March, maybe 3 months into this. And he said he's been pretty committed atheist for most of his life, and he's in his mid to late 40s. And he says, I've even tried reading the Bible before, but I don't know what it is about listening to the Bible and your explanations. But he says, I'm beginning to believe, like I believe this now. And I thought that's phenomenal. So there are, a lot of Catholics who are listening. There are a lot of non-Catholics who are listening. And there's even people who wouldn't consider themselves religious at all. I got a chance to talk with probably I've had a chance to talk with more non-Catholic Christians because of this podcast than I have prior to this, which
I think it's extraordinary. One of my friends, Archbishop Hugh, who's maybe listening as we speak, writes books that can be read by anyone who wants to understand what's going on in the culture, and they've been phenomenal. You're kind of the next gen. After Bishop Barron, you're the next generation of communicators. And I want everyone in the church writ large to embrace every tool of communication, because I'm astonished. 450 million downloads. Can you imagine what Martin Luther would have given for that? Can you imagine what Paul would have given for that? What Peter would have given for that?
Oh, it's incredible. It is the reach, it's so easy to get kind of in your own. I think there's something about staying in your own lane that's really good, but there's also something that's just like you want to do something that really helps as many people as possible. This last weekend, we put on a retreat for high school students, and a lot of these students, they didn't know anything. I mean, some of them did. I mean, some of them were really they had really been asking big questions. They're really searching, which is awesome, so good. But so many of them, I'm just like, how do we reach? How do we help you? And it's so good to know that there's, again, millions of people out there who have been reached by the Bible, and just to be able to be part of that it's incredible to be part of that.
Well, Ascension Press and you have done an amazing thing. Jeff Cavins says you have done an amazing thing. But I really want to know, you're from a big and traditional Catholic family. Are you getting grief from your brothers and sisters about being famous?
So the most amazing thing about the Bible in a year for me was my parents did it every day. They listened. My parents had never read the entire Bible. I mean, they've read a lot.
Of course, they're Catholic. They're Catholics. Exactly. Of course we don't read it.
But they every day. So I'm realizing, oh my gosh, the people who taught me how to read, I got to read the entire Bible to them. And then at least two of my sisters and their spouses have gone through the whole thing too. And I just think this is the coolest, the most privileged place I could possibly imagine being, to be able to share this. But the grief, yes, they do not tolerate fools at all, my family. And so I had an interview at one point with Mark Wahlberg when he was promoting his movie Father Stew. And they said, hey, you should interview Mark Wahlberg on the YouTube channel. And I was like, I'm not good at that. And it turns out I was right.
Yeah, I'm sure you're good. It just takes a little practice. Father Mike, I'm out of time. I just want to tell people, Bible in a Year podcast, just iTunes, Bible in a Year podcast. They can download it. When's the best time to start? January 1?
Oh, I say today. Today is a great time to start. And also, we have the new Catechism in a Year podcast starting on January 1.
Oh.
So you have multiple options. In fact, the Catechism in a Year reading plan is available today. If people want to know what we're doing, all they have to do is they text the letters CIY for Catechism in a Year to a number 33777, and they'll get the Catechism reading plan, and that drops on January 1st. So you can tag team them if you want.
Run that text number past us again, Father Mike.
So just text the letters CIY for Catechism in a Year, CIY to the number 33777.
33777 CIY. I just appreciate you a lot, Father Mike. Thank you for what you've done. It takes a long time to get the pronunciation of those names down. And golly, gee, man, oh man, I love the Bible in a Year podcast. Father Michael Schmitz, thank you. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Back, America, I'm Hugh Hewitt. I have a brand new column up at the WashingtonPost.com landing page, the key paragraph of which is a summary of the Republicans' closing argument. Quote, 87,000 new IRS agents, $400 billion in gifts to student loan borrowers, lawyers, doctors, Wall Streeters among them, double-digit inflation in grocery stores and gas prices rising again, stock markets way down, crime and migration surging, public education in a shambles, the military woke and broke, Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Iran threatening. That's the closing argument. Joe O'Dea is making it in Colorado. He joins me now, the next senator from Colorado. Good morning, Joe. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, great to be with you. You just got to look at the situation these Democrats have put us in, and it's got to be intentional. It's got to be intentional. They couldn't have done all this in accident in just 2 years. It's unbelievable to me what they've done to our economy.
Now, Joe, unfortunately, Democrats have noticed your rise. They're now coming in hard against you. That means you're over the target. Michael Bennet is running for cover. How do you feel about the race right now?
Well, just like back in 1986, Hugh, Keith Bishop turned to Elway and said, guys, we're deep in Brown's territory, and we got them right where we want them. The rest is part of a beautiful Bronco history, Hugh. We got Michael Bennet right where we want him. We're going to drive this campaign straight to victory in November. The only thing holding me back right now is resources. JoeO'Dea.com. That's JoeOdea.com.
Joe, did your staff not tell you I am a lifetime Browns fan and a season ticket holder? Did they not tell you that?
I knew it would mean a lot to you, and I wanted to make sure that you knew I loved your show.
You put the arrow in my heart. Every time I go to Mile High Stadium, they play Kevin Mack dropping the ball in the end zone, and they play the drive. I can't go there anymore, Joe. But I'll forgive you if you're a good senator. Where do they go to contribute?
JoeOdea.com. That's JoeOdea.com.
How do you close the last 30 days, Joe? I mean, what's the plan?
Well, I've been the underdog all my life. We just keep working hard. I got my nose to the grindstone. We're talking about the issues that matter to working Americans. They're going to do it themselves. They're unhappy. This all-time high crime, inflation out of control. All I got to do is talk about it. That's what they're talking about, and they're ready for a change. We're just going to grind out these last 30 days.
I don't know if debates were ever part of the plan. I know you were open to them, but I think Michael Bennet was hiding. Are there going to be any debates in Colorado?
It looks like I've got one. Last minute, we're going to be on a Friday night at 7 o'clock on finally here the 28th. But, ballots will have been out for a week and a half. So
the 28th?
Yeah.
Michael Bennet agreed to debate you on the 28th of October?
Well, they're all on the Joe Biden program hiding in the basement, right?
Oh, my goodness. That should cost him the election right there. And now, I know why I didn't want to debate. Mark Kelly debated Blake Masters last week, and he got sliced and diced on the border, Joe. And I mean, he just said, why did you vote for 87,000 IRS agents and the border is open? And Mark Kelly went, abba, dabba, dabba. Mike Bennet will be the same thing, right? I mean, there's just no answer for the border.
Exactly. And 87,000 IRS agents shaking down working Americans with record inflation. We just lost a whole month of buying power. I mean, these guys are lost.
Oh, well, I don't know what gas prices are doing in Denver. In Nevada, where Adam Laxalt is winning, they're over $6 a gallon. In California, where congressmen are going to be elected in districts where Democrats are now, but, for example, Scott Baugh is going to beat Katie Porter, gas is $7 a gallon. What is it in Denver Metro, Joe?
It's $3.75 a gallon and on its way back up. It's headed up now.
And how about food prices in Colorado?
I just paid $4.88 for eggs, a dozen eggs, if you can believe that. It's almost double what it's been. Prices are up 20% here at the grocery store. It's just not a good situation for working Americans.
Joe, you've run a campaign which I think is admirable in not appealing to ethnicity or race, but the New York Times wrote a warning story that Latinos are voting for Republicans as though it's the end of the world. What have you found in the Spanish-speaking community?
The same thing you're finding in every community. People are upset about the price of groceries, the price of their rents. They want their lives back. They're worried about it, and crime is running rampant through the Hispanic communities right now. It's really bad up here in the North Denver, Westminster, Thornton. Those guys are feeling it. So it's going to be a great November 8th. We're just working hard.
No, we're on in Colorado Springs right now, Joe. So I'm curious, where do you have to win the most? Where do you have to run up a margin? Is it in the Springs to offset blue Denver, or is Denver no longer a deep blue with crime out of control there?
Look, we're starting to get some Democrats out of Denver that are backing my campaign, if you can believe that. That's how mad people are here in town. We're gonna win Colorado Springs big. We're gonna win Pueblo, and we're gonna take parts of Denver, the metro area. We'll win Douglas County. We'll win Adams County, all the way up through the gut. It's going to be a great November. I'm just, like I said, put my head down, just keep grinding it out. Democrats just keep making mistakes, and we just keep telling people, you want something different, you got to put some different leadership in there.
Joe, I note that almost every big name Republican has come and campaigned for you. You were a center right guy. You're like Mike Braun in Indiana, a businessman who got into politics reluctantly. How are the turnout at events? The one thing I can't measure, and they never tell you, is level of enthusiasm at small and large events. You have to feel that. Do you feel it?
Oh, you can feel it on the ground. We had 80 people RSVP for an event last week, and 190 showed up. I mean, that's the kind of show up we're getting out of people. Senator Tim Scott was just out here talking about education and what we've got to do with education to get it back on track. And we attracted 200 at a rally. It's pretty powerful right now. People are, like I said, they're ready for a change.
I am going to come out to Denver and be part of this at the KNUS rally for the Republic coming up a week after this one. Joe O'Dea, I hope I see you there. In the meantime, joeodea.com. People need to contribute because every dollar counts, and the Dems they're trying to stop the hemorrhaging by spending their way out of oblivion, Joe, but they won't. When you flip that seat, the red wave will shock California.
It will, and Hugh, you'll be able to find me there. I'm going to have my Bronco jersey on, buddy.
Oh dear. You know, Joe, you can't make me not love you. I love the way you run. I love the way you're going to win, but you cannot make me not love you. But I will not forget. We will talk about this when next the Browns beat the Broncos.
Good to be with you today, Hugh. Thanks again for all the help, and we'll see you out here in a week.
Oh, I will talk to you before then. JoeO'Dea.com. Everyone asks me where to put their money. I tell them JoeO'Dea.com and Adam Laxalt. Those are the two races and Blake Masters as well. We're going to win. Thank you, Joe.